Hi, this is Scott Bradfield. This is the umpteenth episode of Reading Books in the Bathtub, reading great books in the bathtub. And we're on chapter 4 of Ulysses. We're reading our way through Ulysses. As readers, we're trying to ignore all the crap that's written about Ulysses. That's the basic premise. The other thing about reading is that reading, we try to focus on reading during the mess of our days, with all the things on our minds and jobs and there's often too many distractions to read properly. I spent 45 minutes trying to start my terrible computer, a Dell Inspiron 15 7000 series. Every time you turn it on, 1%, 2%, it just goes forever updating and downloading and updating and beeping. It's the worst computer I ever had. It reminds me so much of why I never bought a PC for 10, 15 years. So there's my rant, and there's something else beeping and showing up on the screen. Never buy a Dell Inspiron. It's a horrible system, and they don't know how to run their software. Okay, we're on part 2, and now we're really going to spend most of the time with Bloom, chapter by chapter. This chapter is a great chapter. You should be able to follow through most of it. I want to point out a few places as I remember them from reading this morning that are significant. Not as plot devices, but as part of the chapter and of the morning. Because think of these as chapters. Don't worry so much about all the details of the overall day. But they're a morning. It's a morning in Bloom's life. And what's happening to Bloom and how he feels is all quite well presented. Okay, we start with we bring the focus down slowly into Bloom to let us know we're shifting point of view. As any good writer does. Joyce does it just the way you do it. Mr. Leopold Bloom ate with relish the inner organs of beasts and fowls. He liked thin giblet soup, nutty gizzards, a stuffed roast heart, liver slices fried with crust crumbs, fried hencods roes. Most of all, he liked grilled mutton kidneys, which gave to his palate a fine tang of faintly scented urine. Okay, so now we've basically given a nice big general picture of our man. Bloom is going to be our central character for the next several hundred pages. And we know a little bit about him, and then we cut straight to the moment of time. You see, so many writers do this. So many of my students can't figure this out. If we're going to give any general picture of our character, we do it at the start of the chapter, and we immediately specify when things are happening. Second paragraph. Kidneys were in his mind as he moved about the kitchen softly, writing her breakfast things on the humpy tray. Gelid light and air were in the kitchen, but out of doors, gentle summer morning everywhere made him feel a bit peckish. The coals were reddening. Series of very clear visual smells, sights, the way he feels in the morning, and he's writing her breakfast things. We don't get information. It's just to him, Molly is just her, the woman he serves, basically. And he spends the morning preparing her breakfast and getting going in bed and going off to make some money for her. I have to shut off another piece of thing on this terrible. Never buy these computers. Okay. Now we've got him now going off and checking off. And again, look how quickly we get time in the scene. We know where we are, and we're watching the tick-tock of the clock as Bloom goes about his day. Another slice of bread and butter. 3, 4. Right. He's checking it off in his mind. She didn't like her plateful. Right. He turned from the tray, lifted the kettle off the hob, and set it sideways on the fire. It sat there dull and squat, its spout stuck out. Cup of tea soon. Good. Mouth dry. The cat walked stiffly around a leg of the table with tail on high. Now. I can't pronounce exactly what that is, but no one can pronounce it. What's nice about good writers is they're giving us indications that help us hear things in our own mind. So it does get that voice, the guttural voice of the cat and the purr all mixed together. And that's what all these images are doing. It doesn't have to give an Updikean description of this cat, but the tail up, ready to come eat, and then that one voice of the cat. So perfect writing. He starts talking to the cat for a while, and I want to show you one other thing that's going to happen at the bottom of page 66. While he's watching the cat eat, we've talked about this. When we go into Bloom's head, or Stephen's head, it's not just a morass of thoughts, as sloppy writers do. The thoughts are sort of registered in a little sense of time, and there are things that happen while the character is thinking, and it helps us hear these thoughts as kind of like an inner dialogue. So time is passing nice and crisply in these passages. Look at page 66. Watch this paragraph. He often starts the paragraph with a nice clear description so we know where we are and what's happening. Then we might go into some interior thoughts. Then in the middle of it, it'll be almost like registered or time marked while we see things happen. And then we go back into the thoughts. So time is passing even in these thoughts that occur in the characters. He's listening to the cat. He listened to her licking lap. Ham and eggs? No. No good eggs with this drought. So then he thinks about what's he going to have for breakfast. Want pure fresh water. Thursday. Not a good day either for a mutton kidney at Buckley's. Fried with butter, a shake of pepper. Better a pork kidney at Douglas's. While the kettle is boiling. She lapped slower, then licking the saucer clean. Why are their tongues so rough? Now look at how that's laid out. Thinking about food and almost coming to a decision about what he's going to buy, then looking at the cat again. The cat does something, so we see what he sees at the moment he sees it, just as we hear his thoughts previously. It's all laid out nice and clearly. That's how you're going to be able to find your way through these thoughts. And then as he looks at the cat, his thoughts change to, why are their tongues so rough? To lap better, all porous holes. Nothing she can eat? He glanced around him. No. So again, the thoughts are nice and clear. It's not about just what he's going to eat, but about eating itself. And the paragraphs are nicely laid around a series of events, and the thoughts are laid out in the sequence of those events. All right, now let's look around. We're on page 67. Move along much more quickly here. We hear about the bed. 67. He goes to the bedroom and he says, "Do you want anything, hon?" A sleepy, soft grunt answered, Molly's a big, lazy, kind of selfish, physical, sensual woman who just lies in bed all day if she could do it. No, she did not want anything. He heard then a warm, heavy sigh, softer, as she turned over and the loose brass quoits of the bedstead jingled. So again, these nice physical, sensory moments. And then he remembers how the bed was shipped over by Molly's father. I think that's old Tweety. And we have some reflections on Tweety. And now Bloom goes to get his breakfast, his kidney, I think he's going to buy. And he takes his hat out, and he takes his hat down, and this is the middle of page 67. The sweated legend in the crown of the hat told him mutely, Plasto's high grade, ha! It's supposed to be hat, because it's been worn away. But that notion of a sort of Plato almost, ha, about the reality of the world is a joke that Bloom will recognize, and Plato and Joyce can't forget throughout the book. Now, as he's looking inside the hat, he peeked quickly inside the leather headband, white slip of paper, quite safe. So here as readers, again, we don't know what that object is, but we do know that... Oh, I gotta pause for a second. Hold on. Sorry. We do know, but we find something in the hat. We see a slip of paper. Again, just like he talks about, I'm going to make her breakfast. We don't know who Molly is at the moment. We see the slip of paper as, again, Nabokov's great line, we have to have a great memory to be readers. This is something worth remembering because it'll come up later in the chapter. Okay, so now he's got a piece of letter, a letter in his hat that he's hidden away, and we're going to see another letter hidden away soon in the chapter. So now we're walking down the street. You're going to notice he's constantly looking at girls. It's pretty clear that he's thinking about having sex with Molly, but Molly's not interested. And he thinks about women all the time, and every woman that walks past. Besides looking at women, he's looking at the value of houses. Bloom's always looking out for seeing, well, how much is that house worth, how much is the rent on that, and so forth. And he can't. We find out in this next few pages that how he makes a living is he canvasses for ads. So he gets people to put ads in the newspapers, and then he takes a commission off those ads. That comes out just because he's looking around and he sees Mr. O'Rourke and he thinks, should I canvass him for an ad? And that's what he's thinking, canvas for an ad. Then he reflects on poor thing about poor Dignam, middle of page 69. I made the mistake yesterday. I think I said it was McCabe who died or something, but Dignam has just died, and they're going to go to his funeral later. So it's on his mind that he's going to the funeral. He talks to Mr. O'Rourke. He keeps going down the story. He goes to Douglas's window to see the meats laid out, and he sees, this is kind of a funny little passage I'll read, he sees the next door girl. He refers to her as the next door girl. She's a girl, like a serving woman who works next door. And this will give you a picture of what's on Bloom's mind most of the day besides eating is sex. He's looking in the window. He says, he stood by the next door girl at the counter. Would she buy it too, calling the items from a slip in her hand? He's afraid she'll buy the meat he wants to buy. Chapped washing soda, her hands rough. And 1.5 pounds of Denny's sausages. That's what she asked for. His eyes rested on her vigorous hips. He's going to be looking at her butt for quite a bit of this chapter. Woods, his name is. It's the name of the man she works for. His eyes rested on her vigorous hips. Woods, his name is. Wonder what he does. Wife is oldish. New blood. No followers allowed. Strong pair of arms. Whacking a carpet on the clothesline. She does whack it, by George. The way her crooked skirt swings at each whack. Okay, we're going to get... Now, you may have noticed that Bloom looks at this woman and he thinks about her punishing something. He likes... There is a pleasure in being punished, you're going to start to notice. And that's the first time you sort of see this in Bloom. Besides his relationship to Molly, which is sort of punishing too. And that notion of the girl whacking that rug is going to be on his mind. And it comes back to this chapter. The crooked skirt swinging whack by whack by whack. All right. Now, he starts to want to hurry up his order as the girl leaves because he actually thinks he wants to follow her and just watch her walk along. Again, sex and looking at girls from far away is sort of Bloom's life in a way. He sees an ad for something called the Agendath Nitayim Planters Company on 72. I'm not sure. As I read this, in the past, I'm sure I've looked that up. I believe it's a Jewish charity which is offering people an opportunity to buy plots of land in Turkey where they can grow olives or something. But it's basically a picture of an Edenic life that you could go away to. And Bloom is interested in that. He reflects a bit on Jews and the Jews after that. He keeps thinking about valuation of properties. Then he comes home, and on 74, middle of 74, we're back out of his head, and we're back in more of a narrative scene at this point. 2 letters and a card lay on the hall floor. Again, we don't have he walked up the stairs. He opened the door. He went inside his house that all boring writers are doing, or some of my students do. We just we see the letters on the hall floor, and we know we're back in the house. Mrs. Marion Bloom. His quick heart slowed at once. Bold hand. Mrs. Marion. He recognizes that handwriting on the letter to his wife. Poldy! And now we hear the voice from upstairs. Entering the bedroom, he half closed his eyes and walked through warm yellow light towards her tousled head. Who were the letters for? And again, we know, as we were showing that chart, we know it's her speaking because it's not him speaking, and she's asking about the letters that she sees that they're in his hands. And he tells him that one is from their daughter Millie. We need to remember Millie too, and she gives her the letter, which is from, I'll tell you, Blazes, from Boylan. Blazes Boylan, his guy she's probably going to have sex with later in the day. And she takes her letter and she sticks it under a pillow. In the same way he's got a letter in his hat. Okay, so we're getting this little balance to the morning, this little chapter. There's a lot of balance in these chapters. Okay, so then he goes downstairs, he cooks, and he starts hearing about blazes, boilins, seaside girls, keeps coming into his head. I'm not entirely sure. Blazes Boylan is the boyfriend of Millie, who she's going to work for, doing a singing gig. And then there's a song called Boylan's Seaside Girls, which I guess is popular at the time. And that song is going to be recurring throughout the chapter, or through the entire book. And it's kind of bringing these two ideas together. Boylan, the boyfriend, and the Boylan's girls, the girls running on the seaside. Okay, now he remembers a few things about a kind of an old man who used to put a mirror in his hat. I can't remember exactly, but I think he puts the mirror in his hat so he can look down women's down the top of their shirts. And then he remembers Millie, and that Millie's grown up now, and that she was always quite sexy, quite attractive girl, someone the boys might like. And then he goes back to Molly to see how she's doing, and Molly says to him, page 77, she walks in and she's basically reading a crappy romance novel. He doesn't really tell you that she's doing that. It's just that she says that when he comes in, here she says, "What does that mean?" He leaned downwards and read near her polished thumbnail. So she's showing him a book. Again, we need to kind of read these moments, and he's just giving us bits of the moments, and then we're filling in the rest. Metempsychosis? Yes, who's he when he's at home? It's Molly's voice. So she sees a word and she's asking what it means, and he says that basically it's about a term for reincarnation. There's a lot of notions, particularly in the chapter with Stephen at the beach, of reincarnation. There's the dead dog, and there's a live dog that comes along to sniff it after we've seen the dead dog. So she shows him this schlocky romance novel, and she says, I want another book by this guy. His name's Paul de Kock. Great name, isn't it? Nice name he has. So, but Molly's a very bawdy kind of a woman, and so Kock is an obvious joke for her, which she's not going to leave alone. Then she mentions something's burning. He runs downstairs for his kidney, which is burning on the stove. He eats. I'm going to breeze through some of this because most of this you can see. The little bit of confusion for me and for you maybe is that there's a song. When we hear Millie's letter, Millie writes a letter. She's working at a seaside town, I believe, working for a vaudeville theater. She's only 15. It's the first year she's away, and Bloom misses her. So you're talking about two lonely characters in the book. Stephen walking along the beach by himself, and then Bloom in this house with this woman who he loves, who doesn't really treat him too well, and then his daughter who he loves is gone. And we also learn here about the same time that he was going to have a son. I forget when it was before or after Millie. His son was going to be named Rudy, and Rudy died when he was born. So he starts thinking about her. The letter from Millie is important. She mentions a friend named Bannon, who I believe is sleeping with her at this point, and he's mentioned earlier in the book. Again, my memory's terrible, but Bannon will come up again. Then we have about 2 or 3 more pages. They're not too long, where we sort of again go through the day with him. We're getting ready to go out. And because almost every physical action that can be described, whether it's picking your nose, rubbing on a rock, it'd be a lot of peeing, a lot of masturbating. And the first thing Bloom does is go in and take a dump in the outdoor privy. And he makes sure he doesn't get his pants dirty because he's going to the funeral later. And while he's in there, he reads a magazine. I forget what it is. Again, don't look it up. Called Titbits. It sounds like they're kind of saucy stories. They're written by the public. They're like prize stories that people write. They sound really terrible. And in the process of reading these terrible romance stories, he reflects on this Boylan coming over. And he reflects on Boylan and Molly meeting each other at a dance. Bottom of page 84, there's a kind of a little rush while we're in the bathroom. We're getting laid out basically the bowels moving. So we have Bloom reflecting on his bowels as they're operating. And then he remembers this little rush of seeing them dance at a party. And he says, that was that was the first night. Her head dancing, her fan sticks clicking. Is that Boylan well off? It's her voice. He has money. Why? I noticed he had a good smell off his breath dancing. He remembers that, again, the dialogue in there isn't marked out as dialogue because they're just little moments that he remembers, and he's kind of jammed them together, remembering the time she asked about whether he had money and he had a nice breath. And from then on, that these memories of her interest in Boylan and Boylan's relationship to her start to gather until now we know he's coming to the house while Bloom's away. He's coming to meet her later, and we're almost certain they're going to have sex when he comes over. After reading this prize story in titbits, Bloom pulls off a half of it and wipes his butt. So that's actually, I don't think that's just Bloom's opinion about this magazine. And then we get to the end of the chapter, and the end of the chapter is interesting. We hear the bells tolling the distance, and they sound like hi-ho, hi-ho. It's off, go to work. Everybody, it's time to go to work. And at the end of it, the tolls die down, and the last thoughts of Bloom all morning is poor Dignam. So we have this kind of busy morning. It's not an unhappy morning, but it's a slightly melancholy morning. He's lonely, and he knows he's going to the funeral, and he's still got to do his work. But the last moment of that chapter is death in a man who's died when he was fairly young. So that's a lovely chapter, really. It's pretty easy to follow. I've tried to flag a few moments that will be important to you and might help you understand the chapter a bit better. But read through it once. This is one you might enjoy reading twice. And tomorrow or later in the week, we'll do chapter 5, which is a little more internal with Bloom. But again, watch how we're marking out those internal passages and try to focus on when we're outside of the character so you know what's happening to them and what they're reflecting upon. Okay? All right, I'm going to go and turn off this horrible computer so it can update and download and update and download and just endlessly tell me that there's something that needs to be done that it doesn't know how to do. A brand new computer is like 6 months old.